Welcome to Section 5.1, Part 1. This is the 36th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll learn how to spot and rank the information you protect. We'll answer several questions. What is the data lifecycle? What actually counts as sensitive data? What is personally identifiable information? What makes health information a special case? What is proprietary data? How do governments define classification levels, and who gets to apply those labels? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because you cannot protect what you have not sorted. Picture a logistics firm holding driver records, route maps, and pricing contracts all in one shared drive. Without labels, every file gets treated the same way. Sort them first, and you can lock the crown jewels tightly while leaving the public brochure open. Classification is the decision that every later control depends on. So what is the data lifecycle? It is the whole journey of information, from the moment it is created to the moment it is destroyed. Your job is to protect it at every stage along that path, not just while it is fresh. The very first step is identifying and classifying what you hold. And remember, assets here mean more than files. They include the hardware that processes the data, the media that stores it, and even the data sets and models behind modern artificial intelligence. So what actually counts as sensitive data? Anything that is not meant for the public eye. That covers confidential records, proprietary work, and anything the law forces you to guard. Some of it protects the business, and some of it protects people. Think of it as the difference between the sign on your storefront and the recipe in your safe. One is meant to be seen, the other must stay hidden. What is personally identifiable information? It is any detail that can pin down a specific human being. A name, a national identity number, a birth date, or a fingerprint all qualify. So does anything linkable back to a person, like their medical, financial, or employment history? You are responsible for guarding this data for both staff and customers. And in many places, the law forces you to notify people when a breach exposes it. What makes protected health information a special case? It is health data tied to an identifiable person, and strict rules govern it. People assume only doctors and hospitals carry this duty, but the reach is far wider. Insurers, billing clearinghouses, and their business partners all fall under it. Even an employer offering a health plan may end up handling it. Treat any record touching someone's physical or mental care as protected. What is proprietary data, and why guard it so fiercely? It is anything that gives your organization its competitive edge. Source code, product blueprints, secret formulas, and internal methods all count. If a rival gets hold of it, your core advantage can evaporate overnight. Legal protections like patents and trade secret law help, but they are never enough. Criminals and hostile actors ignore the law and steal it anyway. How do governments define classification levels? They write them into a policy that names each label and its meaning. The scheme runs from top secret down through secret and confidential to unclassified. The wording separating the top three is almost identical, hinging on the damage a leak would cause. Top secret means exceptionally grave harm, secret means serious harm, and confidential means plain harm. Unclassified is everything else, though even that can carry handling restrictions, like for official use only. So who actually gets to apply these labels? Only a designated classification authority, and the rules are strict. In a national system, that authority sits with a small set of senior officials who can classify data or delegate that power. And here is a point people miss on the exam. These classifications are not just for documents, they apply to the hardware too. So a machine that processes secret data becomes a secret asset in its own right. So let's bring it together. Data has a life cycle, and protection starts with sorting it at the very beginning. Sensitive data is anything not meant for the public, from personal records to trade secrets. Personally identifiable information and protected health information carry legal duties, and proprietary data carries your competitive edge. Governments rank data by the damage a leak would cause, and only a designated authority applies the label. Get this sorting right, and every control that follows has a solid foundation. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 5.1, Part 2. This is the 37th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. Having seen how governments classify data, we now turn to how private organisations do it and what happens next. In this session, we'll take classification from theory into practice. We'll answer several questions. How do private companies label their data? How do you classify the hardware that holds it? What are the 3 states data lives in? Why must you know which laws apply to you? And how do you turn a classification into real security controls? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because a label is worthless until it changes what you actually do. Picture a fintech startup that neatly tags its data as private and public, then encrypts nothing. The labels look tidy, but the protection is imaginary. Your real job is the step after sorting, where each classification quietly dictates a different set of defenses. That translation is where security lives. So how do private companies label their data? They rarely think in terms of national security. Instead, they weigh the damage a breach would do to their own mission. A common ladder runs from confidential or proprietary at the top, down through private and sensitive, to public at the bottom. Proprietary sits highest, where a leak would be devastating, like unreleased films escaping before their launch. Public data, by contrast, is meant to be seen, but you still protect its integrity, so nobody can tamper with it. How do you classify the hardware that holds the data? You match the asset to the data it carries. If a server processes proprietary information, that server itself becomes a proprietary asset. The same holds for a drive or a backup tape that stores the data. A clear physical label on the machine reminds everyone what lives inside. So a workstation touching your most sensitive records wears a bold tag announcing exactly that. What are the 3 states your data lives in? Every piece of data is at rest, in transit, or in use. Data at rest sits on drives, tapes, or storage arrays, and strong, symmetric encryption guards it. Data in transit moves across a network, protected by a blend of encryption methods. Data in use lives briefly in memory while an application works on it. So those buffers must be flushed the moment the work is done. Picture an online store pulling a saved card number to complete a checkout. It stays protected while stored, while it travels, and while the app processes it, then the memory is wiped clean. Why must you know which laws apply to you? Because ignorance is no defense when regulators come calling. Every organisation has to learn the rules that govern wherever it operates. This gets tangled fast for anyone selling across borders online. Imagine a 2-person team launches an app that suddenly sells worldwide overnight. Now they owe compliance in places they have never visited. Many organisations appoint a compliance officer just to keep this straight. So how do you turn a classification into real controls? You start from a data security policy and match protection to each label. Say your organisation guards email differently at every level. Public messages can travel in plain text, but everything above public gets strong encryption in transit and at rest. The highest tier piles on extra rules, like blocking forwarding, printing, and copying. A data loss prevention tool can read those labels and enforce the rules automatically. The pattern is simple. Higher value earns stricter handling. So let's bring it together. Private organisations rank data by mission impact, from proprietary down to public. Hardware inherits the rating of the data it holds. Every asset lives in one of 3 states, and each state needs its own protection. Learn the legal duties that follow your data across borders. Then translate each classification into concrete controls so the label finally does real work. Nail this, and the routines in the next section will click into place. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 5.2, Part 1. This is the 38th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. Now that your assets are classified, this part shows how to handle them day to day. In this session, We'll cover the routines that keep sensitive data safe in motion. We'll answer several questions. How do you maintain data over its lifetime? How do you stop data from leaking out? Why does labeling matter so much? How should you handle and store media? Why is not collecting data a defense? And where should your backups live? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because a breach rarely comes from a clever hack. It usually comes from a sloppy routine, a mislabeled tape, or a forgotten backup. Picture a research lab that guards its live systems perfectly but leaves an unlabeled drive on a desk. That single gap is all an intruder needs. The daily habits you build here are what actually keep the data safe. So how do you maintain data across its whole lifetime? You keep it organized so the right controls always apply. Scatter sensitive files across dozens of servers and protection becomes nearly impossible. One approach is to split networks, keeping classified traffic fully separate from ordinary traffic. An air gap enforces this physically, so the two never share a cable. When you must move data across, use a one-way bridge or a guard that only passes properly marked files. And review your policies regularly, since a stale rule or a poisoned training dataset can quietly become a new hole. How do you stop sensitive data from leaking out? You deploy data loss prevention, a tool that watches for information trying to escape. It scans unencrypted files for keywords and telltale patterns, like the shape of a national identity number. There are 3 flavors worth knowing. Network prevention sits at the edge and inspects everything leaving the organization. Endpoint prevention runs on the device and can block a copy to a USB stick or a print job. Cloud prevention is the same idea tuned for cloud environments. Most tools also hunt down where sensitive data hides, so you can go lock it down. Why does labeling sensitive data matter so much? Because a label tells everyone instantly how careful to be. A tape marked secret leaves no room for guessing. Labels come in 2 forms: physical tags on devices and digital marks inside files. A header, footer, or watermark travels with a document, even onto a printout. Smart teams also label the ordinary stuff, so an unmarked item looks suspicious rather than safe. And once media carries a classification, downgrading it is rare and tightly controlled, if it is allowed at all. How should you handle and store sensitive media? Treat the media with the same care as the data riding on it. A backup tape holding confidential records is itself a confidential asset. This applies just as much in the cloud as on site. A single misconfigured storage bucket can expose thousands of private records to the open internet. So set permissions on your cloud storage as carefully as you would on any shared folder and verify every handoff of physical media. Why is choosing not to collect data a real defense? Because you cannot lose what you never held. Imagine a small shop that passes each card straight to its processor and stores nothing. A later breach simply has no card data to steal. Contrast that with a firm that hoards every detail it can grab. One breach exposes the lot and triggers massive liability. The rule is clean. If the data serves no clear purpose, do not collect it. So where should your backups actually live? In more than one place, and far enough apart to survive a disaster. Keep one copy on site for speed, and another copy well off-site for safety. Store the off-site copy too close, and a single fire or flood could wipe out both. Larger organizations replicate data to separate geographic regions to keep it available. And if you back up to the cloud, confirm that copy really sits in a different location. So let's bring it together. Maintaining data means keeping it organized and separated so controls hold. Data loss prevention watches the exits in the network, on the endpoint, and in the cloud. Clear labels drive careful handling, and media deserves the same protection as its data. The safest data is the data you never collected, and backups belong in more than one place. Build these routines into daily work, and the classifications you set earlier actually stick. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 5.2, Part 2. This is the 39th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part follows sensitive data all the way to storage, destruction, and retention. In this session, we'll follow data toward the end of its life. We'll answer several questions. How do you store sensitive data safely? Why does erasing a file not really delete it? What is data readiness? And how do you kill it? What are the common ways to destroy data? What is cryptographic erasure? And how long should you keep your data? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because the riskiest moment for data is often when you think you are done with it. A drive you toss in the bin can hand your secrets straight to a stranger. Picture an accounting firm recycling old laptops without wiping them properly. Every client tax record could walk out the door. Knowing how to store and destroy data safely is what closes that gap. So how do you store sensitive data safely? You wrap it in layers that survive both theft and disaster. Encryption comes first, so a stolen drive reveals nothing usable. For physical media, add real physical security, like a locked safe inside a secure room. Climate controls matter too, since heat and humidity quietly ruin tapes and disks. And remember that the data is worth far more than the media, so buy quality, even encrypted drives with a fingerprint lock. Why does erasing a file not truly delete it? Because a normal delete just removes the signpost, not the data. The system drops the directory entry, but the actual bits sit untouched on the drive. They linger until something new happens to overwrite that exact spot, which can take months. Until then, a simple undelete tool can bring the file right back. Think of tearing a page from a book's index while leaving the page itself intact. What is data readiness, and how do you eliminate it? It is the ghost of data that survives after supposed erasure. On a spinning drive, faint magnetic traces and leftover slack space can still hold secrets. Slack space is the unused tail of a storage cluster, and it may pull old fragments from memory. Even careful overwriting can leave whispers that forensic tools can recover. For magnetic media, a degausser scrambles the magnetic field and wipes it clean, but a degausser does nothing for a solid-state drive, so those often need physical destruction. What are the common ways to destroy data? They form a ladder from weak to absolute. Erasing is the weakest, since it only removes the pointer. Clearing overwrites every location so ordinary tools cannot recover it. Purging repeats that process many times for a stronger guarantee, though the most sensitive data can still resist it. Degaussing wipes magnetic tapes and drives, but it leaves optical disks and flash storage untouched. Destruction is the final word. Shredding, incinerating, or pulverizing the media so nothing can be pulled back. What is cryptographic erasure, and where does it shine? It is destroying the keys instead of the data itself. If information is encrypted, deleting the encryption keys leaves it locked forever and unreadable. The name is a little misleading, because the scrambled data physically remains. That means you should still overwrite it, since weak encryption or a stray backup key could reopen it. This method truly shines in the cloud, where destroying the keys may be your only real path to deletion. How long should you actually keep your data? Long enough to be useful and no longer. Some laws set fixed retention periods, and you must find and follow every one that applies. Even without a legal mandate, you still need a clear policy, or people will guess. Keep audit logs long enough to reconstruct a past incident, but not forever, since storage and risk both add up. Overkeeping data is a liability, and a warehouse of ancient backup tapes can turn a lawsuit into a nightmare. What does end of life mean for your hardware? It marks the vendor's stages of stepping away from a product. End of life is when they stop selling it, though they usually keep supporting it for a while. End of support is when even that help stops, leaving you exposed to unpatched flaws. Most hardware follows a refresh cycle timed around these two milestones. Sometimes you keep an old machine alive just to read data trapped on outdated media. So let's bring it together. Store sensitive data with encryption, physical security, and good climate control. Remember that deleting a file leaves the data behind, and readiness can haunt a drive. Destruction climbs a ladder from erasing up to physical shredding, and cryptographic erasure kills the keys. Keep data only as long as it is needed and the law requires, then let it go. And track end of life and end of support so your hardware never becomes a liability. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below, or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 5.3. This is the 40th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll add extra tools to your data protection kit. We'll answer several questions. What is digital rights management? How does a cloud access security broker guard the cloud? What is pseudonymization? What is tokenization? What is anonymization? And how do these privacy techniques really differ? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because encryption and leak prevention only take you so far. Sometimes you need to protect a creative work, tame an unruly cloud, or share data without exposing the people inside it. Picture a hospital that wants researchers to study its records without ever learning a single patient's name. The methods in this session are how you thread that needle. They let value flow while identity stays hidden. So what is digital rights management? It is a set of controls that protect copyrighted work from theft and misuse. The goal is to stop unauthorized copying, changing, and sharing of things like books, music, and software. A license unlocks the product and spells out the terms of use. Always-on authentication makes the product check in with a server before it will run. A continuous audit trail records every use, catching abuse like the same account playing in 2 cities at once. And an expiration date can cut off access when a subscription ends. Watermarks hidden inside a file will not stop a copy, but they can prove who leaked it. How does a cloud access security broker guard the cloud? It sits in the path between your users and your cloud services, inspecting everything that passes. Because all traffic flows through it, it can enforce whatever policy you set. Want every file encrypted before it lands in storage? The broker makes sure that happens. It can also handle authentication, log activity, and raise alerts on anything suspicious. Best of all, it drags shadow information technology into the light, spotting the unapproved cloud apps that staff quietly signed up for. If the security team cannot see a service, it cannot protect it. What is pseudonymization? It is swapping a real identifier for a stand-in alias. Instead of a patient's full name, a record might simply refer to subject 479. The link between the alias and the real person lives safely in a separate, protected store. So the working dataset carries no direct identities. Yet, you can still reverse the swap when you genuinely need to. Think of an author publishing under a pen name. The books are real, but the true identity stays tucked away until someone with the key reveals it. What is tokenization, and where do you see it? It replaces sensitive data with a random string called a token that means nothing on its own. You meet it every time you tap a phone to pay for coffee. Your real card number never reaches the shop's register. Instead, a token stands in for it, and a secure vault elsewhere holds the true number matched to that token. The payment processor checks the token against the vault to approve the charge. Even if a thief grabs the token, it is useless outside that one system. What is anonymization, and why is it so tricky? It strips out enough detail that no one can trace the data back to a person. Done right, the privacy rules simply stop applying because there is no individual left to protect. But true anonymity is hard. Clever inference can re-identify people from what seems like harmless leftover data. One strong approach is randomized masking, which shuffles values within each column so the rows no longer describe real people, yet the totals still hold for analysis. Modern teams also add differential privacy, a mathematical guarantee that no single person's presence noticeably changes the result, which matters a great deal when training artificial intelligence on private data. So how do these privacy techniques really differ? The dividing line is reversibility. Pseudonymization and tokenization are two-way doors, since a protected mapping lets an authorized party recover the original. Pseudonymization suits sharing a dataset with outsiders while keeping identities out of their reach. Tokenization lets a trusted middle party, like a payment network, hold both the token and the real value, while no one else does. Anonymization is a one-way door. Once the data is truly scrambled, there is no key and no going back. So let's bring it together. Digital rights management protects copyrighted work through licenses, check-ins, audit trails, and expirations. A cloud access security broker polices every trip to the cloud and exposes shadow services. Pseudonymization and tokenization both substitute stand-ins, and both can be reversed by someone holding the mapping. Anonymization removes identity for good and cannot be undone. Match the method to your goal, whether that is guarding creative work, controlling the cloud, or sharing data safely. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 5.4. This is the 41st session of the CISSP exam prep series. In this session, we'll sort out who does what with data. We'll answer several questions. Who is the data owner? What do controllers and processors do? Who watches over privacy compliance? What does a custodian handle? And who counts as a user or a subject? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because when a breach hits, the first question is always, who was responsible? If roles are fuzzy, everyone points at everyone else and nothing gets fixed. Picture a retailer where a leak exposes customer records, and no one can say who was supposed to guard them. Clear roles turn that chaos into a clear chain of accountability. Every piece of data should have a name attached to its protection. So, who is the data owner? It is the person who holds ultimate responsibility for a set of data. This is usually a senior leader, like a department head or an executive. The owner decides the classification, ensures the data is labeled correctly, and confirms the right controls are in place. This is a duty with teeth. If an owner neglects it, they can be held liable for negligence. Think of the owner as the person whose name is on the deed and who answers for what happens to the property. What do data controllers and processors do? A controller decides the why and the how of using personal data. They set the purpose and the means, even if they never touch the data themselves. A processor is the outside party that actually handles the data on the controller's behalf. Imagine a company that runs payroll for its staff. That company is the controller, and the outside payroll firm it hires is the processor. The processor may only use the data for the job it was given, and nothing more. Who watches over privacy compliance? A dedicated privacy leader, often called a data protection officer. This role exists to make sure the organization actually follows the privacy laws that apply to it. Cross-border rules can be dense and full of legal fine print, so someone needs to own that complexity full-time. Under some regulations, appointing this officer is not optional but required. Picture a compliance lighthouse, keeping the whole organization off the legal rocks. What does a data custodian handle? The hands-on, day-to-day protection of the data. Owners set the direction, then delegate the routine work to custodians. In practice, these are your administrators, the people who run backups, apply permissions, and keep the audit logs. They make sure the data is stored properly and stays intact. If the owner is the architect of the plan, the custodian is the builder who carries it out every day. Who counts as a user or a subject? A user is anyone who accesses data to get their job done, and they should only ever reach the data their tasks require. Think of your everyday employees signing in to do their work. A subject is different. It is the actual person the data describes. If a file holds details about a specific customer, that customer is the data subject. One touches the data, the other is described by it. So let's bring it together. The data owner carries ultimate responsibility and can be held liable. Controllers decide why and how personal data is used, while processors handle it under strict direction. A data protection officer keeps the organization aligned with privacy law. Custodians do the daily, hands-on protecting, running backups and permissions. Users access data for their work, and subjects are the people the data is about. Pin every role clearly, and accountability stops being a guessing game. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 5.5. This is the 42nd session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll set a secure starting line for your systems. We'll answer several questions. What is a security baseline? How do impact levels shape the controls you pick? What is tailoring? What is scoping? And why must you still honor external standards? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because building security from a blank page for every system is a recipe for gaps. A baseline gives you a trustworthy floor to stand on. Picture rolling out 100 new laptops, each hardened by hand, and each slightly different. One forgotten setting becomes the crack an attacker slips through. Baselines make secure the default, not the exception you hope someone remembered. So what is a security baseline? It is an agreed minimum set of controls that every in-scope system must meet. It gives you a consistent, secure starting point instead of improvising each time. A common way to enforce one is imaging. You harden a single machine, capture it as a template, and stamp that same secure image onto every new device. Automated checks then run in the background and quietly reapply any setting that drifts out of line. Think of it as a factory-approved blueprint that every unit rolls off matching. How do impact levels shape the controls you pick? By matching the strength of protection to what is at stake. A widely used framework sorts systems into low, moderate, and high impact, based on the harm a compromise would cause. Low impact gets a lighter baseline, while high impact stacks on much stronger controls. There is also a dedicated privacy baseline for any system handling personal data, which you layer on top of the others. And the levels build upward. So a high impact system inherits everything below it plus its own additions. Rate the system honestly, then let that rating drive the baseline. What is tailoring? It is adjusting the baseline so it truly fits your organization. A generic set of controls almost never lands perfectly on day one. Think of buying a suit off the rack, then having it altered to fit your exact frame. Tailoring works the same way. Tuning control values, adding what the baseline missed, and swapping in compensating controls where the standard option will not work. For example, you might tighten a lockout policy from 5 failed attempts down to 3. The baseline is the starting cloth, and tailoring is the fitting. What is scoping, and how does it fit in? Scoping is the trimming step inside tailoring. Here you walk through the baseline and keep only the controls that actually apply to the system in front of you. If a control guards against something your system simply cannot do, you remove it. Say a machine never allows 2 people to sign in at the same time. A control policing simultaneous sessions is pointless, so you scope it out. But every removal must be justified in writing, so no control quietly vanishes without a reason. Why must you still honor external standards? Because some requirements are not yours to negotiate away. Outside rules can impose mandatory controls no matter what your own baseline says. Handle payment cards. And the payment card industry standard sets terms you must follow. Process the personal data of people in certain regions, and their privacy law binds you too. Not every rule applies to every organization, so your first job is to identify which ones govern you. Then make sure your tailored baseline fully satisfies each of them. So let's bring it together. A security baseline is your minimum secure starting point, often enforced through imaging. Impact levels set how heavy that baseline should be, with a separate layer for privacy. Tailoring shapes the baseline to fit your organization, and scoping trims out the controls that do not apply. Above all of it sit external standards you have no choice but to meet. Start from a strong baseline, fit it carefully, and secure becomes your default state. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session.